Hello everyone, today we are going to learn Chapter 2 Understanding the Weather Part 2 from your Social Science textbook. In this video, I'll be covering each and every line from the chapter so you don't miss anything important. Make sure to keep your notebook and pen ready and take notes while watching. This will help you remember the concepts better. You can pause or rewind any time to write things down. So, let's begin. See, atmospheric pressure. Our bodies are quite aware of temperature and rainfall, but you may also have experienced that the weather sometimes feels heavy as before a thunderstorm. This is related to atmospheric pressure, which is the pressure exerted by the weight of the air above and around us. So, we easily feel things like temperature and rainfall. For example, we know when a day is very hot, very cold, or when it is raining heavily. But sometimes before a thunderstorm, you may feel that the weather is heavy or uncomfortable, even though it is not raining yet. This feeling is related to atmospheric pressure. Atmospheric pressure is the pressure caused by the weight of the air present above and around us. Even though we cannot see air, it has weight. The huge amount of air in the atmosphere presses down the Earth's surface and on our bodies. When atmospheric pressure changes, especially before a thunderstorm, we may feel a heaviness or discomfort in the weather. So, besides temperature and rainfall, atmospheric pressure is also an important element that affects the weather we experience every day. The atmospheric pressure is higher near the sea coast and lower as we go higher up into the mountains. When you climb a mountain, the air gets thinner than in the plain below. As a result, the air pressure is lower and there is less oxygen available for your lungs to take in. With less oxygen getting into your blood, your body has to work harder to keep you moving. That's why people sometimes feel breathless, dizzy, or tired at high altitudes. So, atmospheric pressure is not the same everywhere. It is higher near sea level and becomes lower as we move higher into the mountains. When we climb higher, the air becomes thinner, which means there is less air around us compared to the plains. Because there is less air, the atmospheric pressure decreases. The amount of oxygen available in the air also becomes lower. Our body needs oxygen to produce energy and keep us active. When less oxygen enters the lungs and blood, the body has to work harder to perform even simple activities like walking or climbing. As a result, people at high altitudes may feel breathless, dizzy, or tired. So, the higher we go into the mountains, the lower the atmospheric pressure and oxygen levels become, making it more difficult for our body to function normally. This does not mean that the atmospheric pressure is always high in the plains below or on the coast. In fact, it sometimes drops dramatically, resulting in what meteorologists call a depression or low pressure system, which can sometimes develop into a storm or even a cyclone. So, we learned that the atmospheric pressure is generally higher in the plains and coastal areas than in the mountains. However, this does not mean that the pressure always remains high in these places. Sometimes the atmospheric pressure in a plain or coastal region drops suddenly. When this happens, meteorologists call it a depression or a low pressure system. A low pressure area acts like a magnet for air. Air from the surrounding regions starts moving towards this area, and as the air gathers and rises, clouds begin to form. If the low pressure system becomes stronger, it can develop into a storm, and in some cases, especially over warm oceans, it may grow into a powerful cyclone. So, even though plains and coastal areas usually have higher atmospheric pressure, a sudden drop in pressure can lead to the formation of storms and cyclones. Think about it. Why do you think it would be important to measure atmospheric pressure? Who are the people most likely to use such measurements? So, why do you think atmospheric pressure should be measured? And who do you think would need this information? We have just learned that changes in atmospheric pressure can lead to weather changes such as storms and cyclones. So, it is important to measure atmospheric pressure because it helps us predict changes in the weather. A sudden drop in atmospheric pressure may indicate the formation of a low pressure system which can develop into a storm or cyclone. By measuring atmospheric pressure, people can receive early warnings and prepare for such weather events. The people most likely to use these measurements are meteorologists who study and forecast weather, pilots, sailors, fishermen, and disaster management authorities also use atmospheric pressure data because weather conditions are important for their safety and work. The instrument used to measure atmospheric pressure is called a barometer. As with thermometers, there are several types of barometers. The unit they display is generally the millibar, abbreviated as MB. The normal atmospheric pressure at the sea coast is around 1013 MB. A pressure below 1000 MB indicates a depression. So, in the previous section, we learned that atmospheric pressure is important for understanding weather changes. But how do scientists measure atmospheric pressure? They use an instrument called a barometer. Just as there are different types of thermometers for measuring temperature, there are also different types of barometers for measuring atmospheric pressure. The readings on a barometer are usually shown in millibars, that is MB. At sea level or near the coast, the normal atmospheric pressure is about 1013 MB. When the pressure falls below 1000 MB, it indicates the formation of a depression or low pressure system. Such a system can sometimes develop into a storm or cyclone. Think about it. People who journey to places at a high altitude are advised to make pauses on the way to allow the body to acclimatize. Our army personnel serve in high altitude places like Kardungla in Ladakh, which is over 5600 meters above sea level. It is hard to imagine how they live and work in places that the oxygen level is so low. The atmospheric pressure there is generally about 650 millibars. Acclimatize, adjust to a new climate or new condition. So, normally when we move to a place with a different climate or environmental condition, our body needs some time to adjust. This process of adjustment is called acclimatization. For example, when people travel from the plains to high mountains, the air contains less oxygen. At first, they may feel breathless, tired or dizzy. After a few days, the body gradually adjusts to the lower oxygen levels, and this adjustment is known as acclimatization. Acclimatize means to adjust to a new climate or new environmental condition. Imagine that you are traveling from a plain area to a very high mountain. Can you directly reach the top and start running around normally? No. Why? As we learned earlier, the higher we go, the thinner the air becomes. This means there is less oxygen available for our body. If we climb too quickly, our body may not get enough oxygen. We may feel tired, dizzy, get a headache, or find it difficult to breathe. That is why people traveling to high altitude places are advised to take breaks on the way. These pauses give the body time to slowly adjust to the new conditions. This process is called acclimatization. Now think about our army personnel. They serve in some of the highest places in India, such as Kardungla in Ladakh. This place is more than 5600 meters above sea level. At such a great height, the amount of oxygen in the air is much lower than what we have in the plains. In fact, the atmospheric pressure there is only about 650 millibars, while at sea level it is around 1013 millibars. Yet, our soldiers live and work in these harsh conditions. They are able to do so because their bodies gradually acclimatize to the higher altitude. You can see in this picture that the signboard says Kardungla top and mentions 18,380 feet above the sea level. To understand how high that is, it is about 3 times taller than the tallest building in the world. And the signboard also tells us that this is the highest motorable road in the world. The wind. Wind is the movement of air from areas of high pressure to areas of low pressure. Speed and direction are two important factors when we describe the wind. So what is wind? Wind is simply moving air. But why does air move from one place to another? We learned that some places have high atmospheric pressure while others may have low atmospheric pressure. Air naturally moves from an area of high pressure to an area of low pressure to balance the difference. This movement of air is what we call wind. Now, when we talk about wind, two things are very important. First is its speed, how fast the air is moving. Second is its direction, the direction from which the wind is blowing. So, remember, high pressure to low pressure is equal to wind. And whenever we describe wind, we look at its speed and its direction. Think about it. Have you seen seeds like these flying in the wind? What would happen to the seeds if there was no wind? So, think about the role of wind in seed dispersal. Some plants produce very light seeds with special structures that help them float in the air. What would happen to these seeds if there were no wind to carry them away from the parent plant? So, you can write the answer as yes, we have seen seeds flying in the wind. Wind helps them spread to new places. Without wind, the seeds would fall near the parent plant and would not spread far. The wind is an important element of the weather. Its direction and speed help in weather forecasting. Besides, air pilots and sailors need to be aware of wind data as the wind has a great influence on flying or sailing. Farmers also use the wind direction to predict where rain might come from. Also, a greater wind speed will cause the soil to dry faster. So, wind is not just moving air. It can tell us a lot about the weather. By observing the speed and direction of the wind, meteorologists can predict changes in the weather. For example, a change in wind direction may indicate that rain or a storm is approaching. Wind is also very important for people who travel by air or sea. Imagine a pilot flying an aeroplane or a sailor steering a ship. Strong winds can affect their journey, so they need accurate wind information to travel safely. Farmers also keep an eye on the wind. By looking at the direction from which the wind is blowing, they can often guess where rain-bearing clouds might be coming from. Wind speed is important too. On a windy day, water evaporates faster from the soil, causing the soil to dry more quickly. So, whether it is forecasting the weather, flying an aeroplane, sailing a ship, or growing crops, wind plays an important role in our daily lives. So, how do we measure this direction and speed? A wind vane or weather vane has a rotating arm with a pointer at one end and a tail at the other. When the wind blows, the tail is pushed and the pointer turns in the direction of the wind. It responds even to a light breeze. So, we have learned that wind has two important characteristics, direction and speed. But how do scientists find out the direction from which the wind is blowing? For this, they use an instrument called a wind vane or weather vane. It has a pointer at one end and a broad tail at the other end. When the wind blows, it pushes against the broad tail more easily than the pointed end. As the tail gets pushed, the whole arm rotates. The arm keeps turning until the pointer faces the direction from which the wind is coming. In this way, we can know the wind direction. The interesting thing is that a wind vane is very sensitive. Even a light breeze can make it turn and show the wind direction. The wind vane on the tarmac is called a windsock. It gives pilots an indication of the direction of the wind during takeoff and landing. Similar socks are used in industries that release ash or gases. So, we know that wind direction is important. But how do pilots know which direction the wind is blowing at an airport? For this, airports use a windsock. A windsock is the red and white cloth tube that you can see near the runway or tarmac. When the wind blows, air enters the wider end of the windsock and makes it stretch out. By looking at the direction in which the windsock points, pilots can quickly understand the direction of the wind. This information is very important during takeoff and landing because wind can affect the movement of an aircraft. Knowing the wind direction helps pilots operate the aircraft more safely. And windsocks are also used in some industries. If a factory releases ash, smoke or gases, workers can use the windsock to see in which direction these substances are being carried by the wind. This helps them take necessary safety measures. So, a windsock is a simple device that shows the direction of the wind and helps ensure safety at airports and industries. The simplest instrument to measure the wind direction and speed is the anemometer. It has 3 or 4 metal cups that rotate on a vertical shaft when the wind blows. The stronger the wind, the faster the rotation. A meter attached at the bottom counts how many times the anemometer spins in a certain period of time and calculates the wind speed in kilometers per hour. So, a wind vane helps us to find the direction of the wind, but we should know how fast the wind is blowing. For that, we use an instrument called an anemometer. Anemometer has 3 or 4 metal cups attached to a vertical rod. When the wind blows, these cups catch the moving air and start spinning around. When the wind is blowing gently, the cups rotate slowly, and when the wind becomes stronger, the cups will spin much faster. This means that the speed of rotation tells us how strong the wind is. At the bottom of the anemometer, there is a meter that counts how many times the cups rotate in a certain amount of time. Using this information, it calculates the wind speed, usually in kilometers per hour. Next is humidity. Humidity is the last element of the weather on our list. It refers to the amount of water vapor present in the air. It also depends on factors like temperature, wind, pressure, and location. So far, we have learned about temperature, rainfall, atmospheric pressure, and wind. Now, we are going to learn about another important element of weather, humidity. You might have felt uncomfortable on a hot day even when you're not doing any work. You may feel sticky and sweaty. This happens because the air contains a lot of water vapor. The amount of water vapor present in the air is called humidity. Humidity is not the same everywhere. It depends on several factors. For example, temperature affects how much water vapor the air can hold. Wind can carry moisture from one place to another. Atmospheric pressure also influences humidity. And a place location also matters. Areas near seas and oceans usually have more moisture in the air than dry inland regions. So, humidity tells us how much water vapor is present in the air. Let's explore. Where do you think humidity is likely to be more, Kochi or Jaipur? You might guess that Kochi has higher humidity than Jaipur because it is located near the sea. But how will we know for sure? If we had to compare the humidity level between Kochi and Mangaluru, how would we do it? Discuss with your classmates. So now here we need to think about which place has more humidity and more importantly, how we can find out for sure. We know that humidity is the amount of water vapor in the air. Since Kochi is near the sea, we may guess that it has higher humidity than Jaipur, which is located far from the sea in a drier region. But to know the actual humidity levels, we need to measure and compare them. So, Kochi and Mangaluru, both cities are near the sea. So, it may be difficult to decide which one is more humid just by looking at their locations. Therefore, we need proper humidity measurements to compare them. We can answer these questions more precisely by learning how to measure humidity. Before we move forward, we need to remember our science lesson from grade 6 about the states of water. This will help us to understand how humidity is measured. So, we have learned that humidity is the amount of water vapor present in the air. But how do we actually measure it? Before we understand that, let's recall something we learned in grade 6 science. Water can exist in 3 forms: ice, liquid water, and water vapor. Now, humidity is related to water vapor, the gaseous form of water. Even though we cannot see water vapor in the air, it is present around us all the time. So, to understand how humidity is measured, we first need to understand the role of water vapor in the atmosphere. Once we remember how water changes from liquid water into water vapor, it becomes much easier to understand the concept of humidity and its measurement. Let's remember, when water evaporates, it causes a cooling effect. You might have noticed that after sweating, you start to feel cooler. Why does that happen? It happens because of evaporation. When water changes into water vapor, it needs energy. It takes this energy in the form of heat from its surroundings. For example, when sweat on your skin evaporates, it absorbs heat from our body. As a result, our body loses some heat and we feel cooler. This is why evaporation produces a cooling effect. The more evaporation takes place, the greater the cooling. If the amount of water in the air is already high, more humidity, water evaporates slowly. That is typically the case on a rainy day. So, we just learned that evaporation causes a cooling effect. But does water always evaporate at the same speed? No. Think about a rainy day. The air already contains a lot of water vapor. In other words, the humidity is high. When the air already has a large amount of water vapor, it cannot easily take in much more. As a result, water evaporates more slowly. That is why clothes take longer to dry on a rainy day. Even though water is present on the clothes, it cannot evaporate quickly because the air is already moist. So, the higher the humidity, the slower the rate of evaporation. Humidity of the air is measured as relative humidity, air that would contain absolutely no water vapor, which is impossible in natural conditions, is rated at 0%, while air saturated with water vapor will have a humidity of 100%. In practice, dry weather has a relative humidity range between 20% and 40%, while humid weather usually falls between 60% and 80% relative humidity. So, we know that humidity is the amount of water vapor present in the air. But how do we measure it? Scientists use a measure called relative humidity. It tells us how much water vapor is present in the air compared to the maximum amount the air can hold. Imagine an empty glass and a full glass. In the same way, air can contain different amounts of water vapor. If air contained no water vapor at all, its humidity would be 0%. In reality, this almost never happens in nature. If the air contains as much water vapor as it can possibly hold, it is called saturated air and its humidity is 100%. Most of the time, the humidity is somewhere between these two extremes. During dry weather, the relative humidity is usually between 20% and 40%. The air feels dry because it contains less water vapor. During humid weather, the relative humidity is usually between 60% and 80%. The air contains more water vapor, so it feels moist and sticky. So, the higher the relative humidity, the more water vapor is present in the air. Think about it. If the humidity in Delhi is at 52% while in Kochi it is 84%, in which of the two places are wet clothes likely to dry faster, and where are you likely to sweat more, assuming the temperature is the same in both places? So, we know that when the air contains less water vapor, that is lower humidity, water evaporates faster. But when the air already contains more water vapor, that is higher humidity, evaporation becomes slower. Here, Delhi has a humidity of 52%, while Kochi has a much higher humidity of 84%. So, where do you think the wet clothes will dry faster, and in which place will people sweat more if the temperature is the same in both places? Remember, lower humidity is faster evaporation and higher humidity is slower evaporation. So, you can write the answer as wet clothes will dry faster in Delhi because it has lower humidity, that is 52%. So, water evaporates faster. And we will sweat more in Kochi because it has higher humidity, 84%, and sweat evaporates slowly. But how do we measure such numbers? This is done through an instrument called a hygrometer. Again, there are several types of hygrometers depending on the principle they are based on. The measurement of humidity is of great importance in many industrial processes such as food processing. Museums also monitor humidity as they need to maintain a dry environment to preserve their exhibit. So, we have learned what humidity is and how it is expressed as relative humidity. But how do scientists actually measure humidity and get values such as 52% or 84%? For this, they use an instrument called a hygrometer. Just as the thermometer measures temperature and the barometer measures atmospheric pressure, a hygrometer measures the amount of moisture present in the air. There are different types of hygrometers. They may work in different ways, but all of them are designed to measure humidity. Measuring humidity is very important in many places. For example, in food processing industries, humidity must be carefully controlled because too much moisture can affect the quality and storage of food. Humidity is also important in museums. Valuable objects, paintings, and ancient artifacts can be damaged by excess moisture. Therefore, museums regularly monitor humidity and maintain a dry environment to protect and preserve their exhibits. Weather stations. As you can see, we need several instruments to measure the weather at a particular place and time. A weather station brings all these instruments together, making it easy to measure and track the weather. Readings of all the measurements are taken at regular intervals, which helps in mapping and forecasting the weather. So, in this chapter, we have learned that weather is made up of several elements such as temperature, rainfall, atmospheric pressure, wind, and humidity. We also learned that each of these elements is measured using a different instrument. Now, imagine having all these instruments kept together in one place. That is exactly what a weather station is. A weather station is a place that different weather instruments are installed together so that scientists can observe and measure all the weather elements at the same location. But measuring the weather just once is not enough. The readings are taken regularly throughout the day. By collecting these measurements over time, scientists can understand how the weather is changing. These observations help them prepare weather maps and make weather forecast, which tells us what the weather is likely to be in the coming hours or days. So, a weather station acts like a weather monitoring center, collecting all the information needed to study and predict the weather. An automated weather station. An automated weather station, that is AWS, is a self-operating system that uses various sensors to measure and record weather data such as temperature, humidity, wind speed, and direction, precipitation, and atmospheric pressure. Such stations are widely used in fields like agriculture, aviation, navigation, environmental monitoring, and so on, providing accurate and timely weather information without the need for human intervention. So, we learned about a weather station where different instruments are placed together to measure weather elements. But imagine if all these measurements could be taken automatically without a person having to check each instrument. That is exactly what an automated weather station, the AWS, does. An AWS is a modern weather station that uses different sensors to measure weather conditions automatically. These sensors can record temperature, humidity, wind speed, wind direction, rainfall, and atmospheric pressure. The best part is that it works without human intervention. It can continuously collect and record weather data throughout the day and night. Because the information is collected automatically, it is accurate and available quickly. This makes AWS very useful in many fields. Farmers use it to monitor weather conditions for crops. Pilots use it for safe air travel, ships use weather information for navigation, and scientists use it to study the environment and monitor weather changes. So, an automated weather station is a self-operating weather station that automatically measures and records weather data using sensors. Don't miss out. In 2023, the National Disaster Management Authority set up an AWS at a glacial lake of Sikkim at an altitude of more than 4,800 meters above sea level. The AWS provides early information about upcoming weather conditions. So, we know that weather information is very important, especially in places where natural disasters can occur. In 2023, the National Disaster Management Authority, that is NDMA, installed an automated weather station AWS near a glacial lake in Sikkim. This weather station is located at a very high altitude, more than 4,800 meters above sea level. glacial lakes are found in mountainous regions and can be affected by changing weather conditions. By continuously monitoring the weather, the AWS can provide early information about upcoming weather conditions. This early warning helps authorities and local people prepare in advance if there is a possibility of dangerous weather. In this way, the AWS plays an important role in disaster management and public safety. So, this shows how weather stations are not only used for forecasting the weather but also for helping protect people in vulnerable areas. Predicting the weather. Meteorologists collect data using these instruments over long periods of time. They study the data and use scientific methods to try and predict the weather. Such predictions are very important nowadays as climate change makes extreme weather such as droughts, floods, cyclones, etc. more frequent. So, weather instruments collect a lot of information every day, but simply collecting data is not enough. Someone has to study and understand what the data means. This is the job of meteorologists, who are scientists that study weather and climate. Meteorologists collect weather data from instruments over long periods of time. They carefully analyze this information and use scientific methods to predict future weather conditions. Weather forecasting has become especially important today because of climate change. Due to climate change, extreme weather events such as droughts, floods, and cyclones are becoming more frequent in many parts of the world. Accurate weather forecast help people prepare in advance. Farmers can protect crops, authorities can issue warnings, and communities can take safety measures before severe weather occurs. So, by studying weather data and making forecast, meteorologists help protect lives and reduce the impact of extreme weather events. Accurate predictions help us to be ready for such events. They also enable local governments to mobilize resources and prepare for any disasters. For example, if stormy weather is expected at sea, fishermen are warned about venturing out in their boats, or an entire coastal area might have to be evacuated if a cyclone is expected. So, weather forecasts are not made just for information. They are made to help people stay safe. When meteorologists predict dangerous weather in advance, people get time to prepare for it. This is why accurate weather forecasts are so important. Weather forecasts also help local governments and disaster management teams get ready. They can arrange rescue teams, emergency supplies, shelters, and other resources before the disaster occurs. For example, if a storm is expected at sea, fishermen are warned not to take their boats out. This helps prevent accidents and saves lives. Similarly, if a cyclone is expected to hit a coastal area, people may be evacuated to safer places before the cyclone arrives. So, accurate weather predictions help people, governments, and emergency services take action early and reduce the damage caused by disasters. Let's explore. Discuss in pairs different situations in which weather predictions are helpful. Make a list, and after you have completed it, share it and discuss it with the pair sitting next to you. How many different categories of situations have you been able to identify? So now you need to think about where weather predictions are useful in our daily life. We have learned that weather forecasts help people prepare for different situations. Now you need to identify as many situations as possible where knowing the weather in advance can be helpful. After making the list, you should group similar situations into categories and compare your ideas with other classmates. Look carefully at the map of India above. This map was issued by the India Meteorological Department on 19 May 2024. Study the icons and connect them to the conditions shown on the map. So, this map was issued by the India Meteorological Department, that is IMD, on 19 May 2024. It is a weather warning map that shows the weather conditions expected in different parts of India. Here, green color means no warning. Yellow means watch, be updated. This is the first level of warning. People should keep checking weather updates because weather conditions may change. Orange means alert, be prepared. This indicates that severe weather is more likely. People should be prepared and take necessary precautions. Red means warning, take action. This is the highest level of warning. Dangerous weather is expected or already occurring. So, people should follow official instructions and take immediate action to stay safe. And here the symbols show the type of weather expected in that region. For example, dark clouds with lightning indicate thunderstorms and lightning. Rain cloud symbols indicate heavy or very heavy rain. Thermometer symbols indicate heat waves, cold waves or cold days. Wind symbols indicate strong surface winds. Yellow circular symbols indicate hot and humid conditions. By looking at both the color and the symbol, people can understand what kind of weather is expected and how serious the warning is. Let's explore. What do you observe happening on that day? What are the various weather conditions that the IMD is alerting people to? So, on 19 May 2024, different parts of India were experiencing different weather conditions. The IMD was alerting people about heat waves, heavy rain, very heavy rain and extremely heavy rain, thunderstorms and lightning, hot and humid conditions. So, here the map shows different warning signs, yellow, orange and red, indicating the severity of the weather conditions in different regions of the country. Next is, which states have warning signs? So now we need to look out for the red colored areas because red indicates warning, that is take action, the highest level of weather warning on the map. On this map, the states with red warning signs are Rajasthan, Punjab, Haryana, Kerala and Tamil Nadu. So, Rajasthan, Punjab, Haryana, Kerala and Tamil Nadu have warning signs, that is red alerts and on the map. Next one, which parts of India are likely to be free from severe weather? So, in this map, there is no green color, that is no warning sign does not appear anywhere in India. This means that every part of the country was under some level of weather watch or alert or warning on that day. However, some regions had only yellow alerts indicating less severe conditions than the orange and red alert areas. So, you can write the answer as no part of India was completely free from weather alerts, as the green, that is no warning category, is not shown anywhere on the map. However, parts of central India had fewer and less severe weather warnings compared to other regions. Which states are likely to face heat wave conditions? So, for this we need to look for the heat wave symbol, that is thermometer on the map. Wherever this symbol appears, those areas are expected to experience heat wave conditions. On this map, the heat wave symbol can be seen in Rajasthan, Punjab, Haryana, Himachal Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, West Bengal, Madhya Pradesh and Gujarat. So, you can write the answer as Rajasthan, Punjab, Haryana, Himachal Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, West Bengal, Madhya Pradesh and Gujarat are likely to face heat wave conditions. What are the causes for warning in Tripura and Lakshadweep? So, we need to look at the weather symbols shown over Tripura and Lakshadweep and match them with the legend given below the map. So, Tripura is marked with the yellow alert, which means people should stay informed about weather updates. While Lakshadweep has symbols indicating heavy rain and thunder and lightning. Therefore, people in Lakshadweep should be prepared for these weather conditions. So, you can write the answer as Tripura is under the yellow alert, while Lakshadweep has warnings for heavy rain and thunder and lightning. Before we move on, temperature, humidity, precipitation, wind and atmospheric pressure together define the weather at a particular place. So, throughout this chapter, we have studied different elements of weather, that is temperature, humidity, precipitation, wind and atmospheric pressure. Each of these tells us something different about the atmosphere. Temperature tells us how hot or cold the air is. Humidity tells us how much water vapor is present in the air. Precipitation tells us about rain, snow or hail. Wind describes the movement of air and atmospheric pressure tells us how much force the air exerts. But no single element can describe the weather completely. When we consider all these elements together, they give us a complete picture of the weather at a particular place and time. For example, a day may be hot, humid, windy and rainy at the same time. All these conditions together define the weather of that place. So, remember, temperature, humidity, precipitation, wind and atmospheric pressure together determine the weather at a particular place. The condition of these elements is measured using special instruments. Data collected from these help us to monitor and predict the weather. So, we learned that weather is made up of different elements. But how would we know the condition of these elements? Scientists use special instruments to measure each of them. For example, a thermometer measures temperature, a hygrometer measures humidity, and a rain gauge measures precipitation. An anemometer measures wind speed, and wind vane measures direction. Barometer measures atmospheric pressure. And scientists then study this data to understand the current weather conditions. By analyzing the collected data, they can also predict how the weather may change in the future. This helps us prepare for rain, storms, heat waves, and other weather events. So, special instruments measure weather elements, and the data collected from them helps us monitor and predict the weather. In different times or situations, one of the elements is dominant. For example, rainfall in July, the temperature in May and December, atmospheric pressure when a cyclone is moving, and wind when a low, that is strong, hot and dusty winds that blow in North India in summers is blowing, or forest fires are spreading. So, at different times, one weather element may become more important than the others and have a greater effect on our life. For example, during the monsoon season in July, rainfall becomes the most important weather element because it determines whether an area receives enough rain. In May, people pay more attention to temperature because summer temperature can become very high, and similarly in December, temperature is more important because winter brings colder conditions. And when a cyclone is approaching, meteorologists closely watch atmospheric pressure, since a drop in pressure is associated with the development and movement of cyclones. Wind becomes very important when low winds are blowing in North India during summer, or when forest fires are spreading, because strong winds can make these situations more severe. So, although weather is made up of many elements, one element may become dominant depending on the season or situation. Weather is closely linked to climate. We will discuss this in the next chapter. So, in this chapter, we learned about weather and the different elements that determine it, such as temperature, humidity, rainfall, wind, and atmospheric pressure. However, weather and climate are not the same thing. They are closely related, but they describe different things. Weather refers to the atmospheric conditions at a particular place and time, while climate refers to the average weather conditions of a place over a long period of time. Since climate is closely connected to weather, we first need to understand weather before learning about climate. So, we will study the relationship between weather and climate in the next chapter. So, with this, we have completed the part 2 of the chapter, Understanding the Weather. I hope you found it easy to understand. If you want to see more videos like this, don't forget to like, share and subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching. We will see you again in our next video. Bye bye.